Okay, welcome to AI2's Distinguished Lecture Series. We're really proud and pleased to have Bart Selman with us today. He's a professor at Cornell, old friend and a very distinguished colleague. He's won numerous awards. He's a fellow of AAAI, ACM, a few other small organizations. He's won 6 Best Paper Awards. But I think really the most interesting thing is he's one of the both broadest and deepest intellectual thinkers in AI. He's had a huge impact on fields like planning, knowledge representation, and on the connection between AI and theory. And now looks like he's on to a new set of problems. So really looking forward to the talk.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so it's great to be here. It's actually very exciting to be at this new institute, which I'm very impressed with. So, yeah, this is joint work. I'll be talking with Carla Gomes, also professor at Cornell, and Ronan Lebras, and Stefano Ehrman. I think you've actually seen Stefano also give a talk here. So the broad motivation is to look at scientific discovery and to automate it somehow. It's motivated for me in large part by the fact that automated reasoning technology has become so powerful. So we have very fast reasoning methods now, can handle large problems, very large problem instances, and we want to use it to do scientific discovery. Okay, so I'm going to, you can argue that science and scientific discovery, in terms of sort of human intelligence, are probably the most impressive parts. Arguably the most impressive part of human intelligence to do things like scientific discovery. I'll consider 2 areas, finite mathematics and materials science. Okay. So first, finite mathematics, brief history. So in the early days, and when I say early days of computing, I mean like the 60s, 1960s, 1970s, there was quite a bit of enthusiasm to do mathematics automatically. So to use first-order theorem proving to prove new theorems, to generate new conjectures, and there was a sense that was not far off. So that the work that a mathematician does could be automated. I think we basically realized that's not true. So the search spaces, although first-order logic allows you to specify mathematics, searching for interesting theorems and searching even for interesting conjectures in that space represented by first-order logic is just too large. The space is too large, too unconstrained to find interesting things. So that was somewhat of a disappointment almost. There are a few success stories, so I'm going to give a few success stories. They don't deal with infinity. They deal with what's called finite mathematics, where basically objects of interest are all finite. So think of graphs, finite graphs, and where you have a given set of nodes, but the graph itself is not infinite. So some finite objects in mathematics. Computer science mostly deals with that kind of mathematics. I also, for the historical perspective, I just want to look at real discoveries. There's a lot, the areas of scientific discovery. There's a lot of work sort of where people show how you can rediscover things, rediscover proofs of theorems, or rediscover other things in various scientific areas. But the problem with rediscovery is that it's hard to distinguish, hard to really be sure that the method generates the new fact, or whether you have somehow encoded the previous known path to discovery. So I'm really interested in sort of things that are totally new, no one has solved before. So perhaps the main success, or the main early success for sure, was the four-color theorem, which was proved in 1976 by Hagen and Appel at University of Illinois, Appel. It was an open problem since 1852, so it's actually was a series open problem, and it was essentially solved by a very exhaustive proof by case analysis. In fact, they looked at about 2,000 special submaps, and then after identifying those maps, they used a program to verify that those maps could be colored properly. I would say, actually, and put it up here, that this proof was about 90% human and 10% machine. Okay? The machine was critical to get it done, but the human intuitions of how to go about the proof were really the main part. So Appel and Hagen actually did part of it even by hand and then realized after a while, okay, if we can just automate this, we're done. Okay? So although it's a computer proof, the human aspect was very important. Okay? The proof has been accepted now in the mathematical community. It's been replicated. Still, I think in the mathematical community, there's sort of a sense of that it's an unsatisfying solution to this famous open problem. It's quite inelegant from a math perspective. And the key problem is that the proof itself does not provide any further insights into why the problem is true or why the theorem is true. Okay? So, but that's just the state, and we haven't been able to find a better proof. Okay? So it took a while, but 20 years later, there was another interesting proof. Robin's algebras are Boolean algebra. This is quite a technical statement. It's a statement about sets of axioms and whether one set of axioms is equivalent to another set of axioms. And Robin's conjectured this problem in 1933. So it was a known open problem in mathematics, and lots of people actually looked at this one and also tried to prove it. And no one could actually find that. And then in 96, McCune came up with an automated proof, which basically is a very subtle way of rewriting the axioms. I call it syntactic rewrite of axioms. A long sequence, a few hundred steps, but very clever rewrite, a very large computer search. And the proof I would characterize about 30% human. So McCune had to use his insight to guide the rewrite procedures, to give the right heuristics, to search for the right paths to get the rewrite working. But 70% machine. The machine really had to work for, I think, several months of CPU time at that time, I guess. And now it would be done much quicker. I classify it as semi-human readable. There's actually versions of this proof that have been published as regular math papers, where people show the mathematicians what are the key steps. And it has been accepted now as a true proof. And a little more, definitely more elegant than the other one, because you can actually put it on a page. Okay. And the third example is a very recent one, just actually a few months ago, Erdos discrepancy problem. I don't want to give all the details of these problems because they actually get quite tricky, but Erdos looked at sequences of plus ones and minus ones. So simply, have a sequence of 100 plus 1 minus ones. Okay. Now what you can do is you can step through this sequence and start adding them up. So 1 plus 2 minus 1 back to 1 plus 2 minus 1 and so 1. So you look at the sum going along here. Okay, and you want to constrain that sum. You want to put some bound on it. Let's say I don't want to ever go above 2 or below minus 2. Okay, so you want to have the discrepancy sort of constrained when you step along and look at that sum. Now, you don't only want to do it for just stepping 1, 2, 3, etc. You also want to do 2, 4, 6 steps, step sizes 2, step sizes 3, etc. So you look at all possible subsequences. And now what you want from this sequence is, I want this to be such a cleverly chosen sequence that that sum that I build up never goes above 2 or never goes below minus 2. Okay, so that's the Erdos discrepancy problem. And what did Erdos conjecture? Okay, he conjectured in 1932 that if you make the sequence long enough, 100,000 millions of plus ones minus 1, this C value, the bound you can put, is unrestricted. So the longer the sequences are, you really can't keep it constrained. Between plus 2 minus 2, plus 3 minus 3, plus 100 minus 100. That bound has to keep growing. Okay, that was his conjecture. The sequence becomes long enough. Now the interesting part of it is, now you might say, okay, let's just look at the case C is 2. Does it ever go above 2 or below minus 2? So that was just shown in 2014. And they found, they did two things. Okay, they found that any sequence with more than 1161 plus and minus ones will exceed the bound of 2. Okay, so every sequence, anything you write down with 1161 plus and minus 1 will have a subsequence that grows a little too large. The sum grows a little too large. Goes to 3, I think, or -3. Okay? And they also showed, and this is sort of, I find that somewhat remarkable, I can give you a sequence of 1160 elements that never goes above +2 or -2, or below -2. Okay? So that's a very carefully, you have to imagine quite a long sequence, very carefully balanced. All these subsums always stay within this tight range. Okay? We actually have extended these results recently for the case for CS3, and we have found a sequence of 120,000 +1 -1s that always stays between +3 and -3. Okay? So these sequences are very hard to find. There was actually a crowdsourced mathematics project a few years ago started to find this result, and basically by amateurs or people on the web. They could not find this. Okay? Somebody encoded this as a satisfiability proving problem, and they found it in, I think, about 24 hours. Okay? So the current SAT solvers, current inference technology can find these things, and as I said, we found a sequence for 120,000 that has CS3. Okay? So that's sort of interesting. You can get some interesting mathematical results. And I said, here there's some subtleties in how you encode this problem as an inference problem, but really it's 90% the machine's work. And as an aside, I should say, 5 years ago, no theorem prover could do this, no SAT solver could do it. It's really the SAT solvers of the last few years that can handle this kind of problem. Okay. So that's progress. So about 20 hours. Okay, here, one more subtlety about this, and you should look it up because it created quite a bit of discussion online. There's actually a proof trace of this, 13 gigabytes of little inference steps. Okay, so you can download that. And then the proof has been verified. Every step is a valid step. And these are very simple steps. These are steps of the form A implies B, and given A, therefore B. Okay, very simple modus ponens steps, billions of them. Okay, but true. Okay, so the nice thing here is, and that it took away a big issue with both these cases. Well, especially with this case, it took many years. Decades actually before people agreed that this was true, because you had to write special code to generate this proof. There could be a bug in the code. Okay, and then so basically how people convince themselves, well, it has been redone a few times, never been formally verified, but it has been redone with different pieces of code, and people sort of believe it now. But this is a little different. Okay, here you actually can download that 13 gigabyte proof and run a separate little program that's like a 30 lines of C code. It's very, for C++ code, very small proof checker that will check every step. Okay? Yeah?
Of course, there could be a bug in the encoding of the problem, too.
There could be, oh, no, that's actually a good point. There could be a bug in the encoding. Now, the encoding of the problem, the original clauses, yeah, so there could be a bug. So the original clause, I mean, that again, the code that generates that, these axioms, are fairly small. So, but it's still something that needs to be checked carefully. Yeah. So there I would say you would actually have, let's say, 2 or 3 people encode this problem, and we know it works for smaller kind of problems, etc. But there's still an issue there. Yeah. Okay, but after you assume the encoding, then the checker verifies it. Okay. So. So I gave these 3 examples. These were the main examples I could come up with. I couldn't actually. I think these are the clearest examples of 30-year open problems or 30-plus-year open problems that were solved with a clear answer and a clear advance. But what I don't like so much about these results is they don't give so much insight. They don't give a lot of insight in the underlying problem domain. You don't get further insights into the sequence of +1s, -1s. You just the fact that they have a large discrepancy at some point, but not so much why. So that, I think, is missing from this line of research. So what I'm focusing on is, the question we asked ourselves is, as I said, there's this sequence of 1160 long pluses and -1s, or there are these colorings of these submaps, I actually would like to know how to generate the sequence. What is the recipe for creating a sequence like that? Or what's the recipe for creating the submap? If I know that, and I have a mechanical procedure, like a few lines of code or a little algorithm, that gives me more insight of what's going on, of the actual problem structure. Okay, so that's sort of, I think, what mathematicians are more after. They're more after insights into mathematical objects. Okay, so I'm going to, so I'm going to basically talk about a slightly different problem. We haven't actually, the 1160 is so easy. We're actually working on that as we speak. Ronan is working on. We think that 13 gigabyte proof can probably be reduced to a few hundred kilobytes, if not just a few hundred lines. So we actually think that there's a much smaller proof hidden there, but that has not been identified yet. Okay, so unfortunately I can't present that because we haven't found it yet. But I'll talk about another domain. So just to give you an idea, it's also an area of finite mathematics. And I'm going to talk about, it's called spatially balanced Latin squares. And I first have to sort of introduce what those things are. So imagine a square, in this case 6 by 6, a grid, okay? I'm going to put down 6 colors, okay? So there's 6 different colors here. And I want to have the colors such that each color is exactly once in each row and exactly once in each column, and no duplications, okay? So to carefully, so if you look for black, it's the only black hair, it's the only black hair. If you look for yellow, it's the only yellow hair, it's the only yellow hair. Whenever I do this, I'm a little worried that there's some mistake, but there's none. So I think, okay. So this actually, this is called a Latin square. Okay. It actually, if you want to, we also use a fancier name, quasi-group, multiplication table of the quasi-group. So this is, for finite mathematicians, they talk about quasi-groups. It's a special mathematical structure of multiplication table of a group. To make it interesting, so this is, this by itself is not that hard to generate. I want to do something where I'm going to balance the way these colors occur. So average distance of pair symbols is the same for each pair. I have a bigger version of this guy here. Okay. So what do I want to do? So I'm looking at 2 colors, okay, and I'm looking in each row, okay. I'm looking at these 2 colors, and I'm saying they're right next to me. I'm saying distance 1, okay. In this row, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, distance 4, okay. In this row, it's 1, 2, 3, distance 3, okay. So I'm looking for this pair, and for each row, I'm going to say how far are they apart, okay. Now there are many more pairs. There are 36 divided by 2, I think, different pairs there. But I'm giving a few of the pairs of colors, okay. Now, so each row I give the distance, okay. Then I add them up, 14, okay. I do the same thing here, red and blue. Distance 2 first, okay, red and blue, they're right next to distance 1, okay, again 14, okay. So you see, the surprising thing of this particular Latin square is the distance of all these pairs is exactly 14, okay. And this actually goes for all possible pairs of colors. That's what we call a balanced Latin square, okay? Now you might say, why would you care? So this is actually used in experimental design and statistics. So if you sort of think of these, how correlated, I do 2 different experiments on let's say, literally, plots of land or something like that, and do different experiments. I want them to be at different distances in each row, and I want to have sort of the same average distance between these 2 pairs of treatments if I average over all the rows, okay? And so it's a way of balancing the correlations in a statistical experiment. As an interesting aside, I guess, so we actually studied, Carla Gomes actually came up, got this problem working in computational sustainability, and these actual designs are used by farmers in New York State to study the use of fertilizers on their land. So they rotate fertilizers, different kind of fertilizers around, and they use these balanced Latin squares to minimize these, or to balance these correlations. Okay. So now, what I want to say about this problem is that it's very hard. It's not maybe not quite as hard as, well, I think it's comparable to the discrepancy problem, actually. But finally, it's very hard. So we have a whole history of it. early designs were done by hand. People could do up, the size 6 was found by hand, okay? And that's known for like 50 years, okay? But then we started using constraint programming, so 9 by 9s, okay? Went up to 14 by 40. These are all different papers, okay? This is finally a streamlined local search was used, so a special kind of local search, 35 by 35, okay? It's the balancing condition to make it sure that every color is exactly balanced, you know, with the same average distance is very tricky, okay? So here it is, okay? So this is 35 by 35, okay? 300 hours of CPU time, okay? Fully balanced, okay? Now, and you know, if you look at this, well, that's, you know, Ronan Labras started looking at this, is, you know, is there any pattern there? Is there any irregularity here? It's actually, you don't really see much, because they're very hard to find, okay? Here, okay. So we can now do 50 by 50 in less than a millisecond, okay? So the colors are replaced by numbers now, so 1 through 50. If you look at all the pairwise distance, everything is balanced out, okay? We can actually do 10,000 by 10,000 in a few seconds now, okay? So this is what we can do now versus, you know, this guy in 300 hours, okay? And the way we do it, and that's what I'm going to show you, is, you know, we discovered the procedure for constructing these guys, okay? So this is a very particular guy. You can't really read the pattern here. It's a little too small. But we actually discovered, you know, how they can be constructed. And that's a new insight into this problem, getting the structure out, okay? So, let's see, so we're, okay. So we've introduced the problem, the example domain, and now let me say how we found the procedure. How did we find that construction, okay? And that's where you know, we need some human insights, we need some search, we need a combination of things, okay? So, let me see. So we're going to use combinatorial search to find it, but it's very hard because, as I say, the 35 by 35 is the largest we could find in 300 hours. Okay, so we have to do some clever things, and we're going to do some things with constraint propagation. We're going to look at some structure step by step wise, and we're going to need human input to actually guide that process, okay? And we'll see in a moment why, okay? But the underlying conjecture that I claim is that a lot of interesting things in mathematics, a lot of interesting finite mathematics, must have some very high regularities in there. And there must be, so even though there can be, you know, many different solutions, exponentially many different solutions, there will be a subset of solutions that is highly structured. That's my conjecture, okay? And that's what we found in this case. What we're doing is, you know, we're gonna work on it's a combinatorial search space. You know, all the possible colorings of these squares. You know, that goes highly exponential. What we're going to do is we have our original space. We don't know where the solutions are, but we're going to. So you see solution islands here. This is sort of little graphics. We're going to assert properties. Like I'm going to search a subspace with symmetry. Only symmetrical colorings are going to be searched, or only colorings with certain rotation properties. So I'm going to split this space. I'm going to assert a property, P1, and P2 is the negation of P1, that breaks up this space and tries to cut off a little subpart. Okay? That's called streamlining in combinatorial search. And now we're going to search this little subspace with this extra property. Okay, so I'm going to search a subspace of symmetrical Latin squares. Okay? And I keep breaking things up further. Okay? The idea is I want to sort of drive my search to an area that is relatively small. We're going to get a lot of structure in the subspace so that my solver can find a real solution. Okay? And that's, you know, and the property, you know, these properties, as I said, that we're going to assert, you know, that is where the human insights come. We'd like to further automate that, but right now we haven't done that yet. We're going to use human insights. Okay. This I'm actually going to, you know, there's some related work. Van der Waarden numbers, another area of finite mathematics, where people looked at, you know, can I find irregularities in my search space? But let me just move on and look for this particular setup. So here's the formal representation of our setup. You can totally skip that because this is, you know, really what it's about. Okay. So we'll start with looking at small examples. We're really doing sort of what a mathematician would do if a mathematician had to solve this problem. Okay. mathematician would look at small problems and look at some solutions and say, they all look symmetrical. Okay, I'm going to assert symmetry to the problem. Okay, so I'm going to add I'm going to add this new property. I'm going to streamline the space. Okay, and then I'm going to find larger solution. Now there's two possibilities. If the streamline search does not give a larger size solution, you may have to look for another property. But if it does, you're going to have new solutions with this new property. Okay, and so otherwise proceed new solution. Now you look at these new solutions with this extra regularity in them, and you assert new properties, new human insights, and you create larger one. And we literally did that. We went from size, I think, 5 to size 6 to size 7 and 9 and up. Okay, larger and larger one, each time asserting new properties that were consistent with where we could still find solutions. So you're really zooming in to very structured problems. Okay, so here's a little.
Quick question.
Sure. Yeah.
Can you just go back a second? So in step 3,
Okay.
you say it doesn't give a larger size solution. You mean solves a larger problem?
Yeah, solves a larger problem. Yeah, yeah. So you at size 5, you insert symmetry. You go to size 6, don't find it. You have to back up. Yeah. Yeah.
It also depends whether that's complete search or maybe you accidentally didn't find it.
Yeah. So that's sort of a balance we strike. So we look for an hour or something. If you can't find it, we give up and try a new property. It might be that we couldn't find it. So, but we want to balance it. We want our procedures to be able to find the solution. So it's actually sort of, if the solutions are too hard to find, it's no good either. Okay. Yeah. So this is the setup, and Ronan sort of, made this. So you would start with very small, and it's 3, so it's 3 by 3 size. No streamline. There's no properties. Okay. You basically, so you start conjecturing CM, but not yet, I think. We first solve little ones, okay, and you display like 10 solutions or so, and the user looks at those 10 solutions and starts saying, I see some solution with symmetry. Symmetry is something like around the axis, 3 flips here, 1 flips here. So there's a symmetrical solution. So the user then said, okay, I'm gonna add symmetry to it, and I'm gonna go to a larger size. 5, okay? I'm going to solve it again and generate some new guys, okay? So now you have 5 by 5 solutions, becomes a new solution set, okay? And you're going to look again, is there more structure now, okay? I think in this picture, actually, what we did is we found that, we were going for size 6 with symmetry and cyclic, and we discovered that you couldn't find any solutions anymore. Yes.
So the strategy that you described sounds very compelling. The kind of streamliners you're describing sounds like they would be pretty easy to formalize. So that's just the obvious question, do you really need the human in the loop?
So these ones look easy to formalize. They actually, so what we found is a very good question. And we still would like to formalize, and we would probably like to do it automatically, ultimately. What you'll see in a moment, there's going to be streamliners that are actually very subtle. So that really, where we felt, where literally Ronan, this was actually done Ronan interactively, where he found properties that are not as simple as these ones, where he said, hey, there's something strange happening here, and he wrote that down. So that's the hard one to capture. These ones we could indeed do automatically. So right now, there's still these little extra ones that are key. So. But I should say, ultimately, we'd like to have a system where maybe we also automatically generate some of those. Yeah.
But have you done, that's a fair point that I can sort of see that, but I wonder if you've done the experiment, you can imagine generators of these and some kind of grammar of these streamliners, and maybe the ones that Ronan found are subtle and difficult to formalize, but maybe the ones that the computer finds are ones that Ronan would have a hard time with, but they're equally or more effective. So I'm just wondering, have you done any experiment trying to?
We haven't done that. It's definitely something we would like to do, where you have a grammar of these constraints. Actually, I think he does have a grammar for the constraints, but we haven't done that automatic step yet of trying that. I actually think it's a fascinating thing to do. So,
have you tried having how to generalize from forgetting that it's actually solving this problem and give it the solutions you found?
Yeah.
And then tell it, okay, tell me why these are different than random assortments of numbers. and seeing if you can actually see that maybe we discover not the structure that you're looking for, that, oh, it's a particular, balanced. They discover instead, oh, look, it's actually symmetric, and that's the thing that it discovers.
Yes. So from the automatically discovered from the examples we see?
From the examples, but don't tell it what the actual constraint was that led to the fact
that led to
solving this problem.
Yeah, so it's sort of related to what Oren asked, is, could you do this automatically looking at some example solutions now? Yeah, we have, that's, I think, again, that would be a fascinating thing to do. We use some sort of machine learning thing, some sort of pattern recognition thing, and that would, again, make sense, yeah. So, okay. So I think this at least gives the idea how this works, and Ronan actually showed this is a system where you just literally the user interacts dynamically with the system, and this is, I guess, just the interface. So conjecture. So there's indeed a little description language for the streamliners. It's just almost looks like just code. You pick which ones you want to add. You pick some time limit, how long you search. You can set how many you want to see, how many examples, and you select solutions. Now, so one thing that's also critical is if you start looking at random solutions of size 6 or 7 or larger up, you actually don't see anything because most of them just look too random. Okay, so it's actually this incremental process is important to eliminate things that don't have any structure. Okay. So here we started building up larger and larger ones. You literally look at them, okay? And let me just show you sort of what happens. So here are these very stream reduced from assignments of columns 2, multiple I. So they get more. So when I say symmetry and things like that, that looks straightforward. Other streamliners get a lot more subtle, okay? Second sequence decreasing, for example. So we would see something happening, decreasing over and over again, and going from row to row. Okay. So this is now what he did. So without streamliners, you can solve up to about size 6. Okay. So this was a fairly efficient solver, but this is sort of the limit. And he can actually, I think he can size 5. He can generate 5,000 over 5,000 solutions. But he could not do 8, 9. These you can't find any solutions. Okay. So then you start throwing in the streamline symmetry. This is adding up monotonically. We've thrown out things that didn't work, I guess. So we're only showing adding symmetry works, cuts it down to 240 solutions. Okay, cuts this down to 8,000. But now you can go up to size 9. Okay, then yeah.
Can you? This whole framework is incredibly cool. But I guess the question I'd like to ask is, first of all, for these slightly less trivial streamliners, you've written them here very terse form, assignments.
Yeah.
Can you just say another word about what they are, and also how they get encoded to the machine, and what kind of expertise is required of the humans to
see them?
These ideas to the
Yeah.
machine?
So I think a key thing is reduced form, for example. Reduced form is actually simply I'm going to put at the top row just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up to 50. So I'm just going to do that in order. We call that a reduced form. So that's fairly straightforward. Assignments of columns 2 and n. We're actually going to fix 1 to 50 in columns 2 and columns n. So we're going to assert that too. Second sequence decreasing, we'll see the example in a moment. So this is maybe a key thing he observed when he looked at the patterns. So when we look at the patterns, you actually you'll see what kind of patterns are visible, and really you have to see the patterns. So the interesting thing is things that aren't visible here become visible here. So you had to go up to size 14 to see the real solution. Okay, but then after that everything fell in place. So yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, if you discover these properties, natural.
Well, so yeah, I should say. So basically, what you can show is when you add symmetries, you still have solutions. Okay. You are throwing out a whole bunch of solutions. Okay. So we're actually we're bringing the space, and we're actually focusing on very particular solutions.
Right. So the implication would be if you have a solution to this problem plus symmetry that implies you have a solution.
there's still a solution there. Yes, 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 yeah. You could try. I mean, I would say that proving that is another thing that would actually be beyond what provers currently can do. But yeah, that's yeah. So just one more thing, I guess. So what do these things look like? These are little loops, basically. Like filled in the first row 1, 2, 3, 4, 50. Fill the diagonal 1, 2, 3 to 50. That's the kind of. So these are very little statement. Little pieces of code, basically. So they're not hard to specify. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. So okay. So we go bigger and bigger. So now let's see. Okay. Now here you still So one reason why you might have some trouble saying, like, what's going on here? Well, let's look at actually, what did Ronan discover this process? So first of all, you had to go to a size roughly 14 to really start seeing the pattern. Okay, that's when after 14, everything started working. Well, what do we see here? Well, first, this is the top row was just filled in 1 to 14. Okay, now the second row. Now here you see this decreasing subset. We have 2, 4, 6. So it starts from 2. We go up until we hit 14, and now we go 13, we go down in steps of 2. So this is this increasing subsequence, decreasing subsequence, okay? Now in steps of 3, 6, 9, 12, now next would be 15 too high, so you start going down, 14, 11, 8, 5, 2, okay? Now you would hit -1, so you have an increasing 1, 4, 7, 10, 13, okay? So this is then going up, going down, going up, down, up. And they get increasingly bigger steps. So now this is steps of 4, 4, 8, 12, 13 back down. And then it gets actually a little tricky because, well, this is steps of 7, 4 to 14, then you 8 to 1. It looks like you're losing the structure, but you actually don't. So if you write down what's going on in each row, it's a very regular pattern. And it's always increasing, decreasing with increasing steps. And that's it. Okay. So now, so basically that's sort of at size 14, Ronan started seeing these patterns. Okay. Then you basically write a piece of code that just specifies what these sequences look like. Okay. First row filling in, then steps of 2, then steps of 3, etc. And the tricky thing here to get this fully right is the boundary conditions. When do you switch? Intuitively you feel like when you 7, 14, now I go over, I have to switch back to the next one. Now figuring out that you have to go back 8 and then down by 7, now 6 and up by 7, those little transitions, you have to puzzle a little bit. And sort of he found out, what is exactly the right formulation for these steps, okay? But I would say, what's the overall message? From the first, if you can get the pattern from the first 3 or 4 rows, then you're home free. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So this is what he discovered, and then you can now say, okay, I have my procedure. Now you can actually prove that's right, and it was actually accepted in the mathematics, Journal of Finite Mathematics, polynomial time construction for spatially balanced Latin squares. With a formal inductive proof that this indeed creates these balanced Latin squares. Okay. So. This is just, after, once you find one solution. So this actually, the key thing here is now at this point, we knew a construction exists. So this was first, I think Carla Gomes actually conjectured this is a very challenging problem, but there probably is a construction. At this point he knew there is a construction. And once you know there's a construction, I guess he actually found some other constructions where I think now, the sequences go downwards and wrap around and interleave. So he found another construction that also, actually slightly simpler construction. Yeah?
So he used this tool or approach to find this other structure? Or?
Yeah. So he just went back and he started asserting some other constraints and he found the other solution. Okay? And I bet there are other ways. There might even be shorter ways still. Okay? Because now you know it exists. Okay? Okay. So just to say, so just to summarize, so the incremental approach is necessary. Okay, you don't see this structure at size 8 if you just generate solutions of 8 without these streamliners, because you see many other solutions. They're totally hidden. Okay, so one thing why you need to do sort of going to larger and larger sizes is to discover, to assert structure to get larger solutions that have enough structure to look at. Okay. The true structure only gets around 14, okay, But again, so there are two issues around 14. You could say, why not just generate solutions of size 14? Why doesn't that not work? First of all, you would have trouble generating any solution at size 14 without streamliners. If you don't have streamliners, you can't actually generate anything. Okay, so that's one thing. But even if you could, there are trillions of solutions of that size. You would not see much structure. In an arbitrary solution, you don't see the structure. Okay, so you have to go to the sequential process of smaller to larger and larger instances with more and more streamlining. Okay, I actually conjecture, and then this is open now, that finite mathematics is it's a specialized subfield. Ramsey theory, quasi groups, all kinds of error correcting coding. There's a lot of work in that area. And most of these solutions are ad hoc. They're done by search routines that find solutions of certain structures, but they don't have these procedures for generating the structures. I conjecture that most of them will have generative structures, but people haven't found them yet. Okay, and this is the framework to hopefully find them. I'm just repeating the same point. So there are these papers that come out. I have a bigger, van der Waerden number or a larger Schur number or something like that, or a better code design. It all tends to be fairly ad hoc. Programs find them, but we don't know why. I conjecture there's structure there. Okay. So now I do think there's the human intuition still. That's a very interesting question. Could we automate the whole thing? Could we learn from machine learning, looking at the patterns and find interesting structure? That would be very nice. It's probably possible ultimately. For now, you sort of need a human looking at these things. Let me see, we did some other points, okay. So now for this project we haven't done, and I think I'm going to be running out of time, so I'm going to not do my next one probably. The materials discovery, we actually crowdsourced a Mechanical Turk. This one we didn't. The interface is a little, complex, and you need to sort of know a bit about the domain to really use it. So this would be sort of, if you want to crowdsource this, you would have to crowdsource this to a group of high school math kids, or some people have some interest in these problems to find the structure. But it would be very interesting to do. Okay. Much more. So I wanted to give you this as a little side thing. How many of you are familiar with Ramsey numbers, or have seen? Few willing to admit, okay. And possibly new types of algorithms. This is actually interesting. I think, if you look at computer science, there are not that many interesting different algorithms. If you actually once enumerate, but Fourier transform, fast Fourier transform, there are maybe a dozen different kinds of algorithms. We don't discover that many new algorithms, okay. This might be a frame where you view that procedure filling in the Latin square as really is an algorithm. Now, this may be a way to discover new algorithms. Okay, but let me just do the Ramsey thing. Okay, so Ramsey theory is a somewhat obscure area of math, but it's all about that when certain combinatorial objects get too large or get of a certain size, there is some forced structure in them. And here's an example. So we have a complete graph on 5 nodes. Okay. I color them randomly. This doesn't look random. This is an example of one coloring. Red and blue, okay? But I've done it a little carefully here because I've made sure that there is no triangle in this graph that is completely blue or completely red, okay? So that seems like an innocuous sort of constraint. I want to color it, okay? But I don't want any of these totally blue or totally red triangles. So any triangle you see here, blue, blue, red, okay? Blue, red, red. Look at all the triangles here. None of them is monogrammatic, okay? So you might say, okay, that can't be too hard. Here's the surprise. You go to 6 nodes or more, there is no coloring that does not have one of those triangles, okay? So 6+ nodes, there always will be either a blue or a red triangle or both, okay? So here's an example, and here, so I don't think there's a red triangle here, but there is a blue triangle here, okay? And if you look at all colorings, which is a lot of coloring, there's a number of edges, which is about n square. Okay, each edge has 2 colors, has 2 to the n square possible colorings, lots of colorings. Okay, all of these colorings have a red or a blue triangle. And therefore we say the Ramsey number R33 for either 3 triangle blue or triangle red is 6. From 6 and up, they will always be there. Okay? Now here's the strange thing. So this has been known for quite a while. 14, so for 4 by 4, so now cliques of 4, okay, is there a clique of 4 nodes that is totally red or totally blue. Okay, once you get nodes, a graph with more than 18 nodes, they will always be there. Yeah.
This is always on complete graphs?
Oh yeah, you start with a complete graph. Yeah. So now a complete graph is 18 nodes or more will always have this click of size 4 blue or red. Okay. Now here you see this little question mark. Yeah. And you sort of think this can't be too hard. Okay. So what did Erdos think about that? Okay. Erdos has this following statement. An alien force, vastly more powerful, landing on Earth, demanding the value of R55, okay? And what's interesting is what Erdos advised us to do. Okay? So, if they ask for R55, we should marshal all mathematicians, all compute powers, and attempt to find the value, okay? It gets more interesting. If they ask for R66, we should immediately attack. So this gives you an idea of how hard Erdos judged this problem. Okay. And so if there's any positive message out of this talk, I think that this is a little too dire. Okay. So I think with this streamlining and the search technique, we will find a way of coloring these graphs to find the right colorings and to find these numbers via constructive methods. So, but of course not quite done. Okay, so but I'm actually thinking we should probably.
Yeah, we have about 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Should we wrap up? Should we just wrap up, or should I?
Well, if you can describe it in about 10 minutes would be great.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm gonna. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Briefly. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is I gave it for a mathematician. So. Yeah, I had to warn them about the data. So this is a different project, and Stefan might have mentioned it. It's materials discovery, also part of our computational sustainability effort, because we believe that new materials will be a major role in solving sustainability problems. So, for example, for fuel cells and car batteries, or rechargeable batteries, we need new materials, and there's a tremendous potential there. However, what surprised me about material science, it's called material science, is that it's still an experimental science. You cannot actually, the models are not powerful enough to theoretically predict properties of materials. You actually have to just create them, and that's what they do. They mix materials together, and then they study their properties. Okay, so we're actually working with a Caltech group now that is going to they're on path to screen 1 million samples a day. Okay, they're printed with a laser printer, new materials, and they put them in an X-ray diffraction thing, but it's not a regular X-ray. It's like a synchrotron. So you don't want to put your hand in this thing because it uses very high intensity X-rays to get an X-ray diffraction pattern of your samples. The samples are literally 3 metals sputtered on a sample, and then you have mixtures everywhere in between, and you put your X-rays there, and you want to now know what is my crystalline structure at that point. Okay, so you have to analyze the X-ray patterns. Okay, now the X-ray patterns look like things like this. Okay, just a bunch of peaks. But of course, what it is a combination of a lot of sub-patterns. Okay, so so now the good thing is, since we only have 10 minutes or 5 minutes now, I don't have to explain anything. So because it gets complicated.
Streamlined.
Yeah, it's all streamlined. Believe me. But ultimately your analysis. So you get a whole bunch of X-ray patterns. You do some analysis and you get regions where you have pure phases, pure crystalline phases, mixed phases. You want to pull that out of these X-ray patterns. Okay, a very challenging thing, and it's done actually the way we started working with them a few years ago, actually 2 years ago. They would do experiments for a week at the Cornell Synchrotron and spend a year analyzing the output, okay, by hand, because there's no good automated way until we started trying some things. Okay, here. So what makes this is the model. And it has all kinds of physics built in and lots of variables and stuff like that. So we could formulate it as a constraint optimization problem, and the optimal solution is a good interpretation of the X-ray patterns. Okay, it still wasn't quite enough. So we could do interesting synthetic instances. We couldn't quite do the full-scale instances. So that's why we brought in this crowdsourcing thing. So let me so this is the whole framework, but I think what only matters is actually, so here satisfy SMT. So if you're interested in sort of the most powerful reasoning technology and you want to try something that can do 1 million variables, hugely complex problems, look at these SMT solvers, set modular theory solvers. They combine satisfiability with reasoning about the integers and other theories. Okay, very powerful. But we wanted to try some human aggregation things. Let me just, so this just shows that we get reasonable interpretation better than the previous approach. The next slide is more interesting. Can we boost our solver? You know, because it's not quite fast enough. Can we boost it with human input? Okay, and so we went to a mechanical Turk, and we showed Turkers patterns of these X-ray diffraction patterns. Okay, so it's pictures of them, heat maps. We were looking for special variables in our problems, but the Turkers have no idea what they're doing. I guess, well, I shouldn't say it that way, but they are asked to do something like this. They see a pattern like this, and they have to click when they see peaks lined up, peaks that might be going together. They have some little test they do first to see whether they can sort of see patterns. But they might say, okay, these peaks look like the same lengths and they're parallel, and this one is also parallel, so I'm going to put my clicks there. This one becomes more ambiguous where it is, but this one is different. Okay, so this one is different. These two might go together. Okay, so they spent a few, literally 10, 20 seconds looking at lots of these guys, at each single sample like this, and clicking on the peaks and identifying them. And we give them, a few hundreds, and then we had a few hundred Turkers combined, all give that input. So the interesting thing, they had no idea that it even was about crystallography. I mean, that doesn't matter. You just have to look at the visual. Okay. Now you take all that data, okay, and you see, what patterns did they, on average combine? Where was there some consensus on the interpretation of these things? Again, they really had sort of minimal knowledge of what was going on. But here's the nice result. Okay. So we took that data, then we abstracted away from that data and looked at, these two peaks are always identified by lots of Turkers together. We would assert a variable in our formulation of our problem, say, okay, these two peaks are same crystalline phase. Okay, so you took, how you can see what happened. So this is the most dramatic one. Is if you had no user input, no Turker input, 46,000 seconds for solving it. With Turker input, 74 seconds. Okay, so you can get enormous speed ups by just asserting, and actually what we did, we assigned about 30 variables in a problem. Okay, so of course we had to process the Turker feedback to see what variables are in the formal model, but only 4.2% of the variables were asserted. And we actually tried to assert the minimal possible because we want to be able to, we don't want any mistakes in our solution. Yeah.
So the human input never slowed it down?
No, we didn't see that. Well, there's one thing that can happen. It can make it inconsistent. So that's why we're asserting, so that we actually, when we do it incrementally. So we assert a few extra variables and see when we can solve it quickly. So that's how we do it, yeah. Because indeed, they can give too much that is inconsistent, and then the solver will actually, the one advantage is the solver will say inconsistent.
So then you're actually calling the solver multiple times with different numbers of variables assigned by the user?
So what we've done, so right now it's sort of offline. So we collected all the data and then we did the experiments with the solver. Ideally, we want to integrate it. Yeah, we want feedback and produce and ask for new data from the Turkish based on how our solver is doing. That's not working yet. Yeah. So we're also not, we ideally, this is great, but we want instances we can't solve yet. So that's the next step. Yeah. Okay. But it's a nice example. It's promising. This is actually the first. There's the folded work, which is very revolutionary. But the gamers basically solve the problem. There's a little bit of algorithm, the wiggling of the structures going on, but not a lot. It's really the gamers who solve the problem largely. This is really a symbiotic approach. Like you need to do the solver because the Turks only provide like 1 or 2% of the solution. Okay, the solver does the rest. So we really want to have this complementary approach. And again, it raises the question: can you go back to what the humans do and learn something from it and just do it automatically? That's another possibility. But it's a nice combination of really a solver with human input, okay, and speed up. So I think there's a real potential there. Okay, and that's it, I think. Let me just, yeah, I can skip this. Okay, so discuss basically two things: human inputs combined with reasoning optimization. But since these methods are so powerful, I think there's a new time for scientific discovery. But we probably have to, for now, which is good for humans, use some human insights to really get interesting discoveries. So it's a nice combination of the two, and this is sort of the time that is possible. The solvers are powerful enough. We have Turker input, so we have people. So we can do things in finite mathematics, and I think there's a lot to be done there, but this is a first example. And we do now things in this material discovery where we do scientific data interpretation using humans and solvers to complement each other. Okay, thank you.
So because Bart is so punctual, I think we have time for maybe one or at most two questions, and then he'll be around for more informal questions. Is there a burning question?
No burning question.
So the second part was very fast, so I probably didn't get it right. But if I understand correctly, the high-level thing is you take the problem, translate some visual stimulus to humans, show them to humans, and they give you some input there.
Yeah.
And then you take it and translate it back into variables. So did you consider just trying to train maybe some vision classifiers to find these symmetries? So you get automation, but it's different kind of automation.
Yeah.
Software or something.
Yeah, that's again, these projects are still ongoing. Really, that's the obvious. That's the next thing to try, I guess. So now we have Turker input. Could we do some visual interpretation of it and see what the Turkers do and use that input directly? We haven't tried that. My sense that's probably true. So, but we have to look at the data. So, I guess our first question was, can the Turkers provide something useful, which is not obvious because just as some background, when we got this model to work. Oh wait, so go back. So when we got this model to work, we asked the students to see, can you assert certain things to speed up the solver? So set some variables that you think should be set. And that doesn't work. So that's sort of surprising. Because the variables they used to set by thinking, this should be set, that should be set, were also the variables that the solver can set quickly. So we were sort of surprised that by going via the Turkers and via this kind of problem representation, we could actually get new insights that the solver cannot set. Because the solver does lots of things, and outguessing the solver is almost impossible. But if a new representation and a totally new kind of input, you actually can get the speed up. So to us, it was a surprise it can be done at all. But now your question is quite right. We could now say, okay, maybe we can do a vision analysis on this and do this automatically. Yeah. Okay? Yeah.
Great. So the rest of the questions, please come up. And thank you again.
Okay.
Great.